Welcome to Seminole Sidelines. Happy Friday. It's a good Friday in Tallahassee when Florida State softball is playing, of course, and we'll have a good start to the NCAA tournament as Florida State will host Marist. It'll be 4 p.m. on ESPN Plus. If you don't have a ticket or if you don't have a spot at the Wrigleyville seats across in the parking garage there at the Seminole softball complex. But if you're there, check us out. Come by. We'll be out on the party deck. We'll be watching the game, looking forward to checking out the 2023 Seminoles as they begin what they hope is a long NCAA tournament run. So Pat Burnham, Bob Ferrante, again, Seminole Sidelines. We're live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday here on the Osceola's YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. We've got a lot to get into today. Obviously a big day, but where do you start? You got to start with Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman made his commitment to Florida State on Wednesday, and the wide receiver room just gets stupidly better and better. But Pat, Keon Coleman, what does he bring to Florida State?
Well, listen, you're getting one of the best receivers in college football. He was Michigan State's leading receiver this past season. I think it's 58 catches for 780-something yards and 7 touchdowns. He was the 8th leading receiver in the Big Ten. You're getting a guy with great size. He's 6'3", about 215. So you're going to get a guy that not only is productive, but presents some mismatch problems. And as you said, with what the other pieces that Florida State has on offense, it's only going to make this group more lethal. I was just sitting around looking at some personnel groupings when you text this morning, and I'm looking if Florida State gets in 12 personnel and has Keon on one side, Johnny on the other, Jaheim at one tight end, Kyle or Biscuit at the other. How are you going to play coverage? What are you going to try to defend? You're going to try to defend the run?
Well, we may have lost Pat. He is frozen. We made it 2 minutes into the episode, folks. It was great stuff. I mean, we were just rolling right along. Pat, can you hear me at all? Okay. Well, we will come back to Keon Coleman once Pat's internet is restored there, hopefully very, very soon. But I think the next part of our conversation was going to be, is this the best Florida State wide receiver room since 2013? My argument now, I'm not saying there's going to be 3 1,000-yard receivers in 2023 at Florida State. There more than likely will not. That was a crazy good season in a high-powered offense for Florida State. But this feels like the best room altogether since those days where we saw, Rashad Green, Kelvin Benjamin, Kenny Shaw, Nick O'Leary. This is a very, very deep group of receivers and tight ends. I think without question, this is the best group of wide receivers and tight ends that we've seen at Florida State in some time. This is a really, really special group. I was looking at the roster too. I think you heard Pat talk about personnel groupings. There are 6 wide receivers who are 6'2" or taller on this roster. So again, we're not talking about Winston Wright or Ja'Kai Douglas, guys who are going to be a big part of this offense. But just from a pure height standpoint, what you can do, that's not counting a Kyle Morlock or a Jaheim Bell. So there is a ton of height there for Florida State to use the vertical passing game, to use some mismatches. What can you do inside the red zone to take advantage of those one-on-one opportunities? So I think Keon Coleman brings you a big, big piece. I was frankly bummed when Micah Pittman opted to leave Florida State and go to Utah. Obviously wish him best. That's another program that needed receivers, but has a good chance to win a Pac-12 title. So he's leaving an ACC title contender for a Pac-12 title contender. Again, wish Micah all the best. But, when Florida State, Mike Norvell and the coaching staff are thinking big as far as transfer portal, they look big. So Florida State looked to Keon Coleman, looked to a guy in Keon who they had a prior relationship with, a Louisiana native. David Johnson knows Keon Coleman well. They were kind of in on Keon early. But this is part of the success story of the transfer portal, right? This is where Florida State maybe wasn't good enough for a Jaheim Bell 3 years ago. Maybe wasn't good enough in the eyes of a Keon Coleman 3 years ago. But now these relationships have been there. And when guys go in the portal, they think, wow, I wasn't thinking about Florida State back then, back in the day, but now there's an opportunity for me to join a program that's coming off a 10-win season. So this is very, very encouraging to see a guy like Keon Coleman pick Florida State over Ole Miss, over some other options. And really, if you're looking for more firepower, more reasoning of why Florida State could win an ACC title, why Florida State could make it to the college football playoff in the last year of that 4-team playoff, Keon Coleman is one more reason that gives you a number of mismatches, a number of different personnel groupings. So potentially, Keon Coleman is in yet another opportunity for Florida State to just utilize that full roster. I think another storyline we've talked about is you can run the ball better because you have so many wide receivers. You can use the tight end in different ways. The Kyle Morlock, the Jaheim Bell. You can use the tight ends much more in a way that Mike Norvell was utilizing them in his 4 years at Memphis. So you have a lot of position versatility as far as blocking. Jaheim Bell as a runner, Jaheim Bell as a receiver. So what does Keon Coleman do? It just gives you an even better wide receiver group. I think without question, this is, to me, the best wide receiver group we're seeing in 10 years. That's an incredible thing to say, especially how far this wide receiver group has come since, say, the spring of 2022. I mean, when Mike Norvell went out and got 4 transfers, immediate production out of Johnny Wilson, Micah Pittman, Winston Wright. If not for that car accident, what could Winston Wright have done last year? Deuce Spann still in the developmental stages, still learning to be a receiver. So Mike Norvell has hit it big with receivers in the portal. What will be to come next? I don't know, but it's going to be very, very fun to watch. I think we're about 100 days away from kickoff, and honestly, I can't wait. I know you can't wait either. What's coming up this weekend, just touch on a little bit. We've mentioned on the Osceola.com, a lot of prospects have scheduled visits for the summer. Some of the big names, Christian Clark, the 4-star running back from Phoenix. Of course, if you've been following the storyline, his mom, Florida State grad, actually works in the recruiting office at Florida State. Yes, his uncle is Kenny Felder, who was a very good football player and obviously baseball player throughout his career. So good bloodlines, good to see those bloodlines. And Christian Clark is weighing Florida State among other schools. And Charles Lester feels like a Florida State lean all along, right? This guy feels like someone who at some point will be at Florida State, and maybe he will commit on a visit. Not saying that's going to be in June, but he has lined up his visits. He is ready to go. That feels like a recruitment that will be over probably before he starts his senior season of high school. So, brief break here as I grab a little bit of water, because as I said a couple of shows ago, words like footprint and these ACC buzzwords are popping up everywhere, right? The new ACC buzzword, get ready for it, success initiatives. Let's all take a drink. Ready? Okay, thanks for enduring that with me. Success initiatives, that's a word I had not heard on Monday when I got in the car and went to Amelia Island for the ACC spring meetings. Had never heard it, but it became the buzzword over there at the Ritz-Carlton. Again, all of the football coaches, men's basketball coaches, women's basketball coaches, the faculty, athletic representatives, athletic directors, they all meet over there at the Ritz-Carlton, 5-star resort on the Atlantic Ocean. Success initiatives became a term, and I kind of want to get into a little bit of what that means. Essentially, you are rewarding schools for performance on the field in football and men's basketball. So in men's basketball, for the NCAA tournament, if you get into the field of 68, you get a win share. And what a win share does is that gives your conference money. So let's say Florida State makes it Miami, Wake Forest, whoever. You get a win share for being in the field of 68. You win a game, you get another win share for the field of 68. Now, these shares add up and the conferences split that revenue. It's good money. It's hard to budget because it varies year to year. This is why it's important that the ACC gets in more than 5 schools. This is why it's important moving forward that Florida State gets back to that Sweet 16 type of team and not the one that has been depleted by injuries. We've seen that depth really take a hit through the years. So Florida State needs to be better at basketball and get back to the NCAA tournament for a reason like this. And the reason is money potentially may be going directly to schools instead of split among those in the conferences. So what does this mean? If Florida State makes the playoff, it may not, these success initiatives may not be around for this coming athletic season, meaning 2023 through 24. Still to be determined what all of these look like, what the splits are. But conceptually, what could it be? For example, Gonzaga in men's basketball, they have a deal with their conference to where they get the full share of their NCAA tournament money. This is a great thing because they're not splitting it among all the other conference members. Gonzaga gets everything. Now, I'm not so sure Florida State will get everything from an ACC revenue standpoint. Will these win shares be split in some way? Will conference schools that get into the NCAA tournament make a little bit more money in the end? That's a possible scenario too. But Florida State will need to get better at basketball. The ACC will need to get better at basketball. Getting back into the NCAA tournament is going to be a big thing because there will be revenue at those top 2 sports, in football, in men's basketball. So the spotlight will be on Florida State and Clemson. What do they do on the football field in 2023? I think in part, by 2024, there's a chance that those playoff schools will be able to keep a larger chunk of the revenue than just seeing it all go among the ACC schools. So how does it exist right now in football? I think a lot of you know the bowl revenue is split evenly among the schools. Even if you're an ACC school and your team didn't get to 6 wins, did not go to a bowl, you're still getting money. But now, if you go to a playoff, if you go to a New Year's 6, you could get more money. This is the, wait for it, success initiative. So I think the beauty of this, it's going to reward those programs that have invested in football, invested in men's basketball, and they've seen that success out there on the football field, men's basketball court. As of right now, it doesn't exist in women's basketball. It doesn't exist in baseball or softball. Could it happen down the road? Possibly, but I think for the purposes of this discussion, the true revenue is in men's basketball and football. One side note on women's basketball, that NCAA contract will expire after the March 2024 tournament. If you recall, the ratings were incredible this last March. This is an opportunity for the NCAA to renegotiate that deal, either with ESPN and their network or go outside of ESPN. You know, CBS and Turner doesn't have the bandwidth to show this tournament, but you put it out there, maybe you get a couple different bids. More money could be there out of women's basketball too, which is a great thing because Florida State has a women's basketball program that goes to the NCAA tournament consistently year after year. But again, I want to make you very aware of this new term, success initiatives. Most of us had not heard too much about the term success initiatives until the last couple of days, but it is now the big term out there in college athletics. We spent the better part of Tuesday out there waiting for coaches, administrators to come out of closed doors. It was almost like we were in recruiting season. Are they going to open the door? Are they going to come out? Are they going to talk? And now, yes, we got to hear a little bit from Mike Norvell. Dabo Swinney was not there. He was on an African safari, if you can believe it. He had scheduled that years out in advance. But we got to hear from Michael Alford, We got to hear from Clemson AD Grant Neff. Jim Phillips detailed a little bit about broadly what these success initiatives are. Pat, I think you're on the phone. If you can hear me, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yeah. So I was just saying, we were waiting for a lot of these people to talk, and this success initiative term, I think, kind of came out of absolute nowhere for all of us. What do you think conceptually? I mean, you've worked at USF, at South Carolina. Coaches are obviously motivated to win. It's the ball game of college athletics. Win and graduate student athletes. But if you were to pitch to a coach the opportunity to gain more revenue for your school because you are good at football, because you are good at men's basketball, is that kind of a slam dunk as far as bridging this ACC revenue gap in your mind?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, you got to keep up with the Joneses, right? But as you said, coaches are motivated regardless of what's going on. I mean, they all want to win. You see these programs that don't have as much money come into Florida State, and it's their season to come in and compete against a team like Florida State. So, listen, as I told you before we started taping, I woke up whatever morning there was this unity letter or what's supposed to be signed. It changed so much of what was going on with uh, the money and the talk of what was going to happen with conference expansion or somebody staying or leaving. But I didn't hear all of your question, Bob. Obviously, we had some technical difficulties there, but I didn't get to hear everything you were saying. But yeah, listen, I thought the ACC meetings were very interesting. I don't know if we got anything done or not at the end of the day. David Hell had from ESPN had a long thread this morning. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, where he listed 5 options and for the ACC, and he said the most likely option, in his opinion, was the challenging the GRO, but that's an expensive and lengthy proposition. But yeah, certainly the revenue sharing part. It's an incentive to win, and I think that was the gist of your question. But these guys are motivated anyway. But is that the best thing long term for the conference? Is that a short term solution to a long term problem? I don't know. I mean, does you become bottom heavy if if Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina are getting the bulk of the money, and Duke, because of what they do in football and basketball? What is that? Does that water down the competition in the conference? Does it? I know one of the things is, certain teams would be able to attract better prospects than others in that model. The gap between the haves and have-nots would be internal in the ACC, like they are between the SEC, Big Ten, and everybody else. So you just have the same issue you have now, only inside your own conference. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens out of this. I don't know what much to expect, and I think the funny thing, Bob, is I was talking to some guys that love Florida State and follow all the sports programs, and someone made the comment to me yesterday, well, all we got to do is pay $120 million to get out. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's the television revenue that's a big part of this thing, and the payout and all of that kind of stuff. So listen, I was hoping that we would come out of the meetings in Amelia Island with some clarity, more clarity than what we had. And I think now, maybe we have more questions than we had before we were going into that. And, I certainly, I know the people that I talk to, they want to go to the SEC or Big Ten right now. I don't, obviously that sounds like it's not a part of the process or part of the plan at this point. And, then if you're willing to do that, if you can figure out a way to do that, as a fan, and you're giving more money to the NILs and to the boosters, and the university's getting more money because they've gone to the SEC, let's just use that as an example, you might see more fluctuations in your success. Are you going to be able to be sustained success in as long a runs as you are the ACC? And, are people going to tolerate the occasional 7-5 season or 8-4 season when they're used to winning 10 games in the ACC, which is, usually the case. When you have good head coach in place, and what we're seeing Mike do with his program. So, like I said, I thought we would have more clarity coming out of these meetings. I think that what you saw was everyone agree in public, and I think the disagreements are probably happening right now on the phones and in conference rooms all around the ACC. And I don't, listen, I'm not. This is way above my IQ level. The whole nuance of the conference expansion and the GRO and GOR, excuse me. But it is fascinating to see, a lot of people think this could, revenue sharing could implode the conference. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I laughed when Jim Phillips basically commented that the ACC is still the third best in terms of television distribution. And I thought to myself, well, duh, because the Pac-12 is imploding.
Yes.
And they are truly, you can call them a Power Five, but they are a very distant fifth. Once USC and UCLA are gone, the Big 12 has done, I think, a really nice job of trying to reshape itself, both geographically as a coast-to-coast conference. But is the Big 12 going to be anywhere near an SEC or a Big 10? I don't think so. I don't see that. So I thought Phillips's statement was lacking precision. The ACC needs to find more revenue. I mean, that's the obvious. There's not a bridge to 30 million. There might be a bridge toward an extra few million here and there through TV contracts. He was asked if there is a look into that ESPN TV contract. Is there an opportunity to renegotiate some deals? There is not. There is not anything in the next couple of years. So there are no easy buttons. I think everybody would have hit that easy button a long time ago if they could. But I think also in part, this is idea season. This is where administrators and coaches gather. I would downplay that these are not necessarily media events where you're expecting big news to be dropped. It's just not designed in that manner. I think a lot of people wanted Jim Phillips to just go out there and say something dramatic. I think they wanted Michael Alford to be as aggressive, on Tuesday night as he was, in February to the Board of Trustees of Florida State. He clearly backed off. He clearly had to back off. But I think, like you said, Pat, very smartly, privately, the pressure is still on. Florida State and Clemson will not back off of a $30 million deficit. Talking with some administrators in Amelia Island, it is very, very clear that Florida State and Clemson are working together. They are seeking revenue opportunities. They're not just leaning on Greensboro, now Charlotte, as the ACC office. So Florida State very active as a player here. Clemson very active as a player. I think some of these success initiatives could be favorable to, Pat, we saw that tweet that kind of lit off a firestorm from Brett McMurphy about this magnificent seven.
Well,
and honestly, it kind of was downplayed throughout the week. There's not this true splinter within the ACC, and Dave Clawson even saying Wake Forest has dropped tens of millions of dollars into football and has a $40 million locker room. And he's basically saying, we're Wake Forest. We make a bowl every year. We'll be fine. We will be rewarded for our success. So I thought it was an interesting version from outside this so-called Magnificent Seven, that it's not that bad, maybe on the outside from his standpoint. So where do we go next, Pat? I don't know. I don't know where we're going. I think they're looking for whatever revenue pops up, through these various deals.
Well, and listen, obviously they're going to look at several different revenue sharing models, but I think to the average fan that they came away from the ACC meeting feeling the way that it almost like the answer was Jim Phillips says, I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, it was kind of deflating, right? I mean, there was these plans are going to go in front of the presidents and these boards or whatever the case may be, and they're going to be looked at and red pinned, and we're all right. We're good with this. We're not good with that, and trying to build a consensus around 14 presidents and ads may be kind of hard. But listen, obviously, I think we're kind of, there's a part, I think the majority of us want this to work out for Florida State, right? I mean, we're Florida State grads, we cover Florida State. The more successful Florida State is, the more successful sites like ours are. So there's the selfish part that wants you to get the revenue sharing done. Florida State stays strong in all sports, get stronger in the ones they're deficient in, those kind of things. But then, what does it do to college football? What does it do to the football in the ACC? What does it do to basketball in the ACC? Is it going to turn? You got 4 really good programs in the ACC and 10 average programs, or 6 average programs. And I don't know. We've seen what it. The only model we've seen was the Big 12, and obviously it did not work, and they went on the greener pastures anyway. And listen, it worked out great for Oklahoma and Tennessee because SEC was willing to take a hit on some money, or they were willing to take a hit. I think $100 million to leave early, and their contract ran out about the same time the SEC's, and all they were being reworked. So the timing just worked out. Listen, I'm sure when they signed that contract extending to 2036, they thought that it was the right thing to do, right? I don't know who's responsible for that. Obviously, they did not factor in conference football expansion, or did not, or maybe they thought that was a way to protect themselves against conference football expansion, that maybe you'd bring teams in instead of lose teams. I don't know. That was done well before I started covering Florida State, and back when I was solely concerned just about what happened on the football field, or I wasn't concerned about what happened on the football field at all. But yeah, listen, I think it's going to be fascinating. It'll be something that we'll talk about until August, and we got something to talk about that's happening on the football field, right? I mean, that's what it's going to be. We're going to talk about recruiting and conference expansion and NIL, and that's going to carry us through the next 3 months. And obviously, it's got a lot of people in the media talking right now that cover the ACC. Bob, I would, if you, once we're done here, I read that thread by David Hale. It's, he's obviously a guy that's got connections with the ACC office and around the ACC. A pretty interesting text thread, very complicated situation. At the end of the day, as I said earlier, before we had our technical difficulties, and I disappeared for 10 minutes, he had mentioned that he thought the most likely scenario was somebody would end up in court, or those particular, the Magnificent Seven. And if anybody knows Brett McMurphy, Brett's a very talented writer, but he's also a smartass, and he intentionally means to be a smartass. That's just who he is. I've known Brett for a long time, and the Magnificent Seven was kind of made in jest. If you follow him on Twitter, he makes a lot of comments in jest. But anyway, listen, it's it doesn't look like anything's going to happen really anytime soon, as far as maybe somebody leaving the conference, whether it's FSU or Clemson. There's a lot, if that was going to happen, you would think there would be some more smoke around that. Yeah, I think what people want is some type of resolution. What the fans want to know is they want some type of resolution, some kind of plan moving forward. But as Mike Alford said, this may be an evergreen thing as long as they're in ACC, right? He mentioned that this could be a thing that gets tweaked each and every year. I mean, I do think he said that coming out of the Tuesday meeting or whatever day y'all talked to him in Amelia Island, that this was a thing that could be continually tweaked over the coming years if the ACC is intact as it is now.
Yeah, I think those are among the big questions. Where are we going next? What's the timeline? I mean, I asked a couple people, what is the timeline? Are we weeks away from some kind of announcement on success initiatives or revenue streams? Are we weeks away? Are we months away? Nobody's willing to put a date or a deadline on it or a delivery point. Does Jim Phillips want to announce it, in Charlotte, late July at ACC kickoff? It's always much better as an event when he has something very tangible to deliver. We saw John Swofford for years kind of tap dance around various issues. So Jim Phillips would love to have something to present. I would argue by the time we are in Charlotte in a little over 2 months, there should be something tangible from the conference as far as what has the conference come up with to help bridge some of these revenue gaps. I thought some big takeaways from what Michael Alford said. Again, the big one is we need to at least stay number 3 in terms of revenue. We need to be competitive on a national scale. We need to be very good, in football and all the other sports. He wants to compete for championships in every sport, not just football, not just basketball, every sport. He's going for softball title. He's going for beach volleyball title. He wants them all. And obviously the golf teams have been very successful in their regionals too. So the investment you cannot back off these investments or you'll lose ground. You may potentially lose coaches. You may potentially lose assistant coaches. You have to keep your human capital. You have to keep recruiting at a high level. I think it's good that Michael Alford is pushing this agenda. And I think hopefully in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, we'll see something more tangible come out of this, out of these ACC spring meetings. I think to wrap up here, we've gone about 30 minutes. One, just a couple brief mentions about FSU in the NCAA softball tournament. Again, 4 p.m. It's a live stream on ESPN Plus. I know some folks have ESPN Plus. If you don't, we'll have a live thread on the Osceola to kind of keep you up with these games. There are going to be some games on ESPN, ESPN2, ACC network. This one in particular, again, ESPN Plus. So if you can't get out there, if you don't have a ticket, stand out in the parking garage. There are going to be some spots on the berm. Standing will be the name of the game. Bring some comfortable shoes if you are nearby and you kind of want to watch them. But Florida State versus Mercer. And the nightcap will be UCF and South Carolina against South Carolina. Was a team that went all the way to the SEC tournament championship game. They had a nice run of late there before falling to Tennessee. So it will be a really good weekend for college softball. If you're at home, hey, multiple screen days, right? Have a big screen, have a second screen, put the iPad or the tablet out. If you want to manage 3 screens at once, God bless you. Send me your photos, tweet at us or include them in the threads, because this is a great time of year to have multiple games on your TVs, laptops, tablets, and all that. Well, again, thanks for watching Seminole Sidelines live with you every Friday, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the Osceola's YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. For Patrick Burnham, I'm Bob Ferrante. Full coverage of Florida State football, softball, baseball, recruiting. If you're catching up on the ACC meetings news, myself, Kurt Weiler, Aria Masudi's got a nice story on men's basketball, what Leonard Hamilton thinks about the roster. He's got some updates on Cam Fletcher, Jalen Gainey. Fish has his fish bits, some thoughts on 2024 prospects, 2025 prospects, what he's hearing as far as scuttlebutt. Full coverage throughout the day and over the weekend on theosceola.com. We thank you for watching and joining us. Again, for Pat Burnham, I'm Bob Ferrante. Thanks for watching Seminole Sidelines.